Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. Here we are, the beginning of change. One would assume that there's a lot of change coming our way on this inauguration day. Doesn't matter whether you're listening to it on this day or even weeks after. There's a lot going on in our country, from disasters, politics, and such. And this gentleman views all of this through the eyes of science. And he's had many, call them eureka moments, involving social phenomena and lots of other theories, including free radical theories and chemical reactions and socio-political explanation of how we operate. And he's published a number of many great articles, books. He's got a great memoir. And we're going to look at our current situation in the country with our professional of the year. Grant Venerable joins us here on the program. Hi, Grant. How are you doing today?
Hi, Stephen. I'm fine. How are you doing?
Very well. Very well. And I have a question, even before we begin. You've talked about this word matrix before, and
yes.
I believe there was a discovery that you made a matrix system back in the 80s. Yeah. Am I right about that?
That's right. It was around 1980. It was the discovery of something I already knew. Now, that might sound strange, but we know, the mind knows everything it already needs to know. It's a matter of putting ourselves in the right situation where we get a picture through our conscious mind of what we already know in the subconscious mind. And it had been in my subconscious in a very personal, very family-related way. It was something that was a difficult transition, and I've mentioned this before. I experienced the death of my mother when I was 8 years old, which was a very an uncertain thing for my father to go to. So he became a single parent, and it got us through. He and the relatives, the extended family relatives, came around the nuclear family of my father and mother and 3 children aged 5, 6, and 8 in December 1950. I didn't realize what I was looking at until 20 years later when I finished graduate school in 1970 at the University of Chicago. I think I've mentioned a little about this before. When I went to visit one of my mother's oldest friends from PTA days at my elementary school, Vermont Avenue School in Los Angeles. And it was a very wonderful community where this school existed, just a mile north of the University of Southern California campus. It was a lovely middle-class, upper-middle-class neighborhood called the West Side of Los Angeles. There were, of course, professors at USC who occupied some of these homes. There were other employees, including the woman who lived next door to us, who was the assistant bursar of USC, who takes care of all of the tuition money that the students paid. But it was really as idealistic an upbringing, I think, that children could have in the United States. I'm not saying it was perfect, but it was perhaps the imperfections that helped give us the challenges to grow and to solve problems. But the neighborhood was so closely knit, even if you didn't know the names of people up the street, they would know about you. You would know about them. So when I got my Cub Scout uniform a couple of years later, the word went out. My father, his sister, my Aunt Neosho put the word out in the school and in the PTA and other ways. And we got a telephone call from a family up the street, half mile away, saying, well, their son is going into Boy Scouts, so he doesn't need his Cub Scout uniform. And would we be interested in having it? It probably might need a little refitting, but that's how I got my Cub Scout uniform. So there was definitely a feeling of caring and taking care of the community. Well, there was the community of extended family that I did not recognize fully until I spoke to Mrs. Herring, one of my mother's PTA sisters. Mrs. Herring was one of the multi-religious community of people, because there were Christian Protestants, Catholics, there were Buddhists, there were Jewish people, there were Mormons, Latter-day Saint Mormons, and others in the community. But the PTA was its own little nucleus of families, women who were very close, and they watched over each other's children when they would have meetings. Well, when I visited Mrs. Herring in, I think, the La Habra area of Los Angeles, finishing graduate school, to say, well, I finished school. I wanted to come out and see you and say hello, because we always heard from the Herrings at Christmas time. We exchanged Christmas greetings. And she sat back in her chair in the living room and said, I have to confess something to you that I realized when I was around your family a lot. I had never seen such a close-knit family. And that's from someone who is in a religious faith that prides itself on maintaining a close-knit family system. And she mentioned how there was always someone from the extended family, as well as the immediate family, who was there whenever there was a need, or a need that was being anticipated for the Venerable children. And that gave me a tip-off to what I was living around as a child and then growing up to adulthood. It was what America had more commonly in its agrarian farm rural areas, where there were strong extended family communities, whether it was West Coast, Midwest, or East Coast, or down south. I began to document who these people were in our extended family who would show up at the right time without even being told what was needed. But there was telephone communication between them. There was visitations from them. And so these relatives would check with each other about what the Venerable kids need, what Grant the father, Venerable, needs to help him operate his family. Well, I was able to document 5 traits of an extended family that was present with my family system. And if you were to make those traits be equivalent to a business or a company, you could tease out a quality called Domain A. And Domain A was where all of the purpose of the family lived. And if it were a company, there would be certain managers that would take care of that purpose. Well, the main purpose of a family was for the youngsters, as well as the parents, to survive and to fulfill themselves as human beings. The next part of an extended family that I saw in my own family were the resource providers of the family. Whatever resources our nuclear family did not possess, extended family people possessed, or they would go find it and bring it in to us. And of course, resources are everything from food to clothing to the house itself, the dwelling, to the transportation needs, to cash needs, to knowledge needs. Information is now recognized as one of the most important resources in the society. Then there's a third trait of a strong extended family. And that was of communication and channels and resource channels. The channels, of course, bring something in to the home from somewhere else. So there were relatives who were great at communication. So they could communicate out to other people about what the Venerables needed. And then there were the channels that were actual channels for physical material things that you needed, like just going to refill the car at the service station. That was a regular channel. The grocery stores, those were regular channels. The bank, regular channels. The schools, all of that. Then there's a fourth resource called change properties for the family. And all that means is that there are members of the family that can look ahead and see what's coming ahead and get ready for it and begin to have the family prepare themselves, like whether it might be applying to college. What colleges? Well, we recommend college A, B, and C. Then there were other things, looking at our health needs, looking at our transportation needs, whatever things had to change in the family, or things that were threatened with changing that did not need to be changing, like maybe the loss of a motor vehicle or something. There's one more property, and that's the main one. And you'll notice these are all potential properties of organizations, whether they be schools or corporations or governments. And the E property, the fifth one, is the organizing principle, the unifying principle. What does that do? It holds the whole extended family together. Who are the holders of the unifying values of the family that unify the family? Usually the elders, the grandparents. And there weren't too many of those, but whenever you have a change and the grandparents die off, you have to have a successor elements in the family. Well, Stephen, that is really the outline of it. Except I decided to take it further based upon what I had learned in chemistry in terms of what are the properties of an atom or a molecule or an aggregation of molecules or a biological cell that enables that aggregation or that cell or that molecule to be stable over time and to endure. So are you following me, Stephen?
I am, and I really want to go back to one basic question. And it's kind of where we started, but it might even lead us to what we're dealing with today in terms of current situation. The word matrix, many of us have seen the movie The Matrix and more.
Right.
How do you define what is a matrix?
A matrix is a material structure that enables everything in it to hold together in a stable configuration. And of course, what is it derived from? It's derived from the Latin mater. And what does mater mean? It means mother. So a matrix, such as a cell, which is a matrix, or molecular structure, which is a matrix, is the mother, the material of that particular substance. The Venn matrix, or the Venerable matrix, as I call it, is a container, a structured container that exists to serve these five principles. And you can have that be a family, it can be a school, a university, an organization. And the Venn matrix really is a way of giving a mathematical description of a structure. And that's what the Matrix movie was about. Although an entertaining fiction, it was about an informational matrix that the human race lived in, that was being dominated by the microprocessor, by computers, and there were all kinds of characters in it that were created by this matrix. Well, the Venn matrix, instead, is nonfiction because it's based upon this scientist's observations of the fundamental structure of the universe itself. Namely, it has to have these 5 properties at least in order for whatever part of the universe is to survive. And that brings me to the real punchline here, which is that the universe has been around for an estimated 12 billion to 14 billion years, which is a long, long time. And we still really can't get our minds wrapped around what that means as far as time, because it may be forever. But the point is, the universe has had more time than any other entity, if you want to call it that, in developing natural systems all the way from atoms to galaxies, from galaxies to solar systems around stars, from stars to planets that revolve around the sun, from the planetary environments all the way to the things that develop. There's only a few environments that seem to be able to sustain living organisms. The what if I had back in 1970, I interrogated a living cell and asked myself, well, what do you need to survive in time and be stable? And discovered that it corresponded with these 5 properties of the extended family. And I said, well, that shouldn't be a surprise. That should be a no-brainer. And I developed the matrix as an algebraic entity called a matrix, which you represent as a 5 by 5 array. So then the array comes from these 5 properties I just described. And then you look at how each property acts upon all the other properties. So if you've got 5 properties, you've got 5 potential interactions. And that is what algebra, linear algebra does, is its ability to put in mathematical predictable terms what you get from a certain kind of system. Now, that's where we are. I mean, these fires just were out of control in Los Angeles. And people are literally freaking out, even highly intelligent people. The fingers are pointing at, well, what caused that? What caused that? And everyone has their favorite cause. What they now need is an organized study and application of the Venn matrix of a system, because it incorporates everything and leaves nothing out. Everything you might not have anticipated, the Venn matrix anticipates through its algebraic properties. Now, that's the whole thing. That's the answer to it. We're having an inauguration today to inaugurate a new presidency, but there's uncertainty, as with any new presidency, what's going to happen. The Venn matrix addresses those very issues, rather than having a raging debate where everyone is taking up their favorite opinions, putting them on their favorite people in the political system, and then everyone gets into a big argument, which seems to be what happens in life. The Venn matrix gives a template for guiding the discussion so that there need not be a raging argument. That's really the whole gist of what I have to say today.
What's your suggestion, given the changes that are coming our way with a change of leadership in our country? And I don't do politics. I'm just stating facts.
Right.
The natural disasters taking place, everything that we've got going on. What's your suggestion to navigate through all of these things and not let it bring us down?
We must rely on our news media. And the news media has departed from its previous obligations to answer the very kind of question you asked. And the way it does that, or used to do it, is by keeping close connection to the intellectual creative forces in society, which are really contained in the university and the K through 12 systems, and that's what it's about.
Yeah. I'll share with you. I'm in a men's group, and we created a separate chat group. One is for business and taking care of, immediate things. The other one, we called it social, where it's just you put up memes, spiritual things that, might help you navigate your day, things like that. Today, it went in a different direction, and it started getting negative and hostile, politically driven, where, we had to shut it down. Everybody, hey, and it was a group of 40 men. And why are we doing this? and that's...
Well, there is a way, and it is to have a round table. It could be an oval table, but it could have about 12 to 20 people seated around it with one ground rule. You use the Venn matrix to ask everyone, well, what are your strengths? You don't even get into the problem yet. Just talk about Stephen, Harper. How do you see yourself? What is your strength in terms of the Venn matrix? Are you one who manages the goals of the family or the organization? Are you able to articulate the goals, the purpose? Or do you look at the resource needs? Is that your talent? Is your talent communication, which I would say it is right now? Is your talent in looking at channels for how we get stuff that we need? Or is your strength as a change agent? Are you a creative change agent? Do you help people see one another who they are? And then the final thing is, are you one who is philosophically, maybe even religiously grounded, spiritually grounded? So you see what the unifying grounding principles are for this organization. Then you reverse the question and you ask everyone at the table, how do you see Stephen? What do you see as his strengths? And then you begin to mix and match people with certain strengths with people who lack those strengths. And you don't try to solve any blobbity problems until you get to know one another. And that's what's gone out of our national conversation and local conversations. People just wade into the fray and don't even know each other. And I don't mean that trivially, like, you're like, oh, Stephen likes steak or fish or other things, like certain kind of automobiles. You get to know each other, and we don't know each other anymore, basically because the extended family was broken up by the Industrial Revolution, now the tech revolution, and it breaks it up even more. So you don't invent things like social media or AI that tends to further alienate people instead of unifying people. Are you following me, Stephen?
I really am. And I love what you said, Grant. And I apply that to the example of the men's group just now, where imagine, and this is on a small scale, but I'm using it just as a broad example. Imagine you identify the strengths of the men in the group, and then you pair them with those who have the strengths that they don't have. Let's say John identifies as, hey, not really that spiritual, but he wants to, get enlightened. And then you have Mike on the other side, who is very spiritual. Pair them together, and then they share things that they're strong with where the other isn't. Interesting way to look at things. I might even suggest that to the group. I think it's a great idea.
Well, it's very powerful. And I need to say something about spiritual. You don't always get that from the synagogue or the church or the ashram or the temple. Spirit really is everything that you don't know, you don't understand, you don't even know how to get to understand it. It's kind of in a mysterious unknown. So we use a word called spiritual. And that needs to start to be looked at without fear. You don't have to create a deity with that. You don't have to create creeds with that. But it's a matter of talking together. I mean, even Jesus in the Christian faith said, I am where two or more are gathered together. So the Spirit comes out of the group of people, the family, the brotherhood, the sisterhood. And I think that's about the most important thing I could say today, is to be with that spiritual flow that develops out of people getting to know one another.
Yeah, and I define spiritualism as believing in something that's bigger than you. And that can be whatever you want it to be. If you want to tie that to the Creator, a God, that's your choice. That's your choice. If you just want to believe,
that's right.
You know, we got a thing that's around us. There's a universe around us. Maybe you believe that it only wants good things for you, but you can't even put your finger on what it is. All right, that's your belief. But just
that's right.
That belief in something. Grant, always great talking with you. Real quick, your memoir, we can find that on Amazon?
On Amazon. They have a Kindle version on Amazon, but it's Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown. Art, Science, Oracles, Kinfolk. It has 4 volumes, and it covers the experience of my ancestors, my family, my parents, myself, my own education, and some of the things I've contributed to the world. It's an amazing read, and I just started reading it online myself.
You know, it's
Grant D. Venerable.
I have to tell you, the title of that so perfectly fits our world today.
Footprints in the Chaotic Unknown.
It's so true.
I didn't know 12 years ago when I started it, I had no idea how much chaos we'd have today.
Well, yes, and
but that's what because I had so much in my life and had to devise methodologies and strategies for getting through it without getting overwhelmed and wiped out, if I could put it like that. But instead, I grew. I got better and better.
And I'm sure that we can get some insight from that memoir. You have a great way of looking at things, through the eyes of science, and then some. Appreciate you, and I appreciate you being here, and looking forward next time we chat.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Grant. We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
They'll challenge your authority. They'll try to break your will. They'll push you to the edge of your sanity. Because that's what kids do. But this car is your territory, not theirs. Defend it. Who makes the payments? Who cleans it? Who drives it? You do. That's who. And in here, your word is law. So when you say you won't move until everyone's buckled up, you won't budge an inch. Until you hear that click. Never give up until they buckle up. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council. For more information, visit safercar.gov/kidsbuckleup.